Hey guys, welcome back into our Python programming series. In this episode, we'll go and talk about Python's decision making structure. A lot of people may know by them by just simply like if-else condition or if-else elif statement or the condition. But that really is all about the decision making, and more like every programming language, it kind of makes use of this is decision making, but maybe a different structure. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. How do you really make the decision in Python? What are the different structure, the command or the options which are available to us in decision making? One more thing you might have noticed on the right hand side of the screen, I have started our IntelliJ IDE. Going forward to write our program, we will be making use of the IDE that we installed earlier into the series. If you don't know how to install or you have forgot, just I highly encourage, go ahead and take a look at that episode's video. We'll walk you through. So without much further delay, let's talk about the decision making. So if you take a look on the left hand side, and again, making use of this time tutorials point because they have pretty good definition out there and some of the diagrams. So it's pretty good. Again, I would highly encourage you to go through these sites for more details. So it kind of indicates, okay, hey, decision making is the anticipation of conditions occurring during the execution of a program and specified action taken according to the condition. So if I need to really break this down, what it says, let's take a look at this picture here. The picture kind of says, okay, hey, this is your program and there is some condition defined in the program. And based on that condition, there can be two outcomes. Either that condition is true or that condition might be false. So if you want to take some action when the condition is true, you can execute certain line of codes. So that would be called as your conditional code. So if you take a look at on this diagram or this flowchart really, there it says, okay, hey, if there is a condition and if the condition is true, you go ahead and execute this line of code. But on the other hand side of this decision, we had a false statement also. Okay, hey, if the decision is not true or the condition is not true, then probably it's false. So in that case, if you want to do something, you could very well go ahead and execute certain line of code. Again, you could put a conditional block if you want, or you can just simply pass on. So if you decide to not to put any conditional code or block when the condition is false, that is just simply a saying, okay, hey, in my program or in my decision making, I'm just only making use of the if statement. And if that condition or the if statement is true, only then I would go ahead and take some action. But if that if condition or my condition is not true, I will not take any action and I'll just simply pass on. So that's the way of putting this together. And as I see, you could definitely execute certain line of code if the condition is false. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. It would be something called, so this is my if statement, and let's take a look at the another diagram we talked about. So in this flow diagram, if you take a look, okay, we have some condition, and this condition can have two outcomes. Either this condition is true or this condition is false. So if you take a look, okay, hey, if the condition is true, we are also executing some conditional code. So that code is called your if code, or the program or the line of code that you want to execute under the if statement. If the if statement is true, you would go ahead and place that over here. But in this flow, we are also executing certain line of code when this condition is false or when this condition is not met. So that line of code, again, the conditional code is called your else code. So when you are writing a statement, this will be your if true condition, this will be your if else condition. So that's what we're going to take a quick look. So if I go back and take a look at our if statement where we just had one action, and if that statement is true and if we need to take some action, that's your if expression or if statement. So you would just say if and you would go ahead and expression. With the expression, the way you need to denote is you need to put a colon and then you need to leave couple of spaces. So these couple of spaces are called indentation. So Python kind of relies on this indentation to define the scope in a code. If I have to compare this with some other programming language, some other programming language might make use of the curly brackets just to define the scope of the code, while Python really relies on the indentation. So you need to keep in mind and you need to leave the enough indentation or enough white spaces that kind of indicates, okay, hey, I want to execute this statement or these line of code only based on this condition. If this condition is true, you go ahead and do this. If this condition is false, then I want to go ahead and do some other action. So that's kind of we talked about. So that's a syntax for the if condition. If I need to take this flow diagram where we were executing two block of code. If the statement is true, we do something. If the condition is false, we do something. So that's simply called your if and else statement. So if expression, just like the previous one we saw, the if expression, but now we have introduced something called this else. This else kind of really denotes this false part of the condition or the flow diagram. So okay, hey, if this condition is not true, that means we need to go ahead and execute certain line of code or certain statements. You can go ahead and make use of that. And as we code more, we will go ahead and take a look at some of these things in more detail. But just keep this flow diagram in mind when you're working with the decision making in Python. Okay, hey, you can have one condition and that condition can have two output, either it's a true or it's a false. If you want to take certain action, when it's true, you go ahead and write that code within the if block of your statement. If that statement is false, you can go ahead and write that block of code in the else statement. Again, we will go ahead and talk about some of the more things. If I want to combine multiple if statement or multiple ways to test, okay, hey, if this previous statement is not true, go ahead and check with some more statements. So that is something called else if, and it's denoted by elif. So we will take that in look at that in action. So if I need to really demonstrate the if condition, let's say, okay, I'll go ahead and make use of this variable. I'll define two variables here, where I'll say, okay, x is equals to 10, and then I simply say y is equals to 20. Hopefully this is visible to all of you guys. And let's leave it for time being. So now if I want to test, okay, say, okay, we just want to check a condition where we'll say, okay, hey, if x is greater than y, just simply go ahead and print a message which says, okay, x is greater than y. So we will make use of our if expression. So if, and now we will go ahead and write our expression. In this case, the expression is we are checking if x is greater than y. So we'll say, is x greater than y? If x is greater than y, then if you take a look at our syntax, we need to put the colons here. So the good thing about when you work with an IDE, something like IntelliJ, it knew, okay, hey, we are working with an if expression. So we didn't have to manually do the indentation. So indentation was automatically done. It clearly says indent expected. That means you are planning to write certain line of code if this statement is true. And that line of code in this case, I'm just writing, okay, hey, I'll put a print statement which is x is greater than y. Now if I go ahead and simply execute this line of code, to execute I can make use of this run button, or you can do shift F10. So let's simply go ahead and I press, but if you see on the bottom of the screen there is no output here, because if I take a closer look, the expression says, okay, if x is greater than y. Is it the case here? X is 10 and y is 20. Is 10 greater than 20? No. So that means the statement, the condition that we were working with was a false condition. If you take a look a bit back this diagram, we were checking, okay, the condition is x greater than y. If really the x was greater than y, then we wanted to execute this line of code. So in this line of code is just simply a print statement. But in our program, the one we wrote, there was no else if the condition is false. So that's the reason we are checking. If I flip the values, let me just make the x as 30, and if I rerun this program, in this case, we would get an output that says, okay, hey, x is greater than y, because now the x holds a value of 30 while y has a value of 20. So indeed in this case 30 is greater than 20, and that says, okay, hey, the condition is true now, and if the condition is true, I need to go ahead and execute this line of code. And this line of code just simply, there is one single line of code which is a print statement. Again, you can have one line of code, or you can have multiple line of code. As we work further, you will see a few more examples. But if I go back to our previous example where x had a value of 10 and y had a value of 20, and if I simply go ahead and execute this program, in this case we are not seeing any output at the bottom of the screen because the statement or the expression in this case is false. But when the condition is false, we are not executing any code in our program. So if we need to add or execute certain line of code when this statement or this expression is false, we would need to make use of this else statement here, or else expression. So we'll just simply go ahead and type here else, and just simply go ahead, put a colon, press enter. Again, the system knows, okay, hey, there is an else, so probably you will be writing some line of code, and that's the reason it says indent expected. And now we can simply go ahead and say, okay, hey, if x is not greater than y, that means probably y is greater than x. And now if I go ahead and execute this program once more, it clearly says, okay, hey, we tested. Now we are checking is or if 10 is 10 greater than 20. No, the 10 is not greater than 20. That means this if condition is not true. That means it's false. So when it's false, it came down into the else block of code. In the else block of code, we just simply went and wrote, okay, hey, that if x is not greater than, then possibly y is greater than x. So now if I change the value of x back from 10 to 30, and if I go ahead and execute this program one more time, in this case we are saying, okay, hey, x is greater than y, because this expression is true in this case, and when the expression is true, we are executing these line of code. When the expression was false, we were executing these line of codes. So hopefully it makes clear how do you really make use of the if-else statement. So now we can go ahead and simply try something else. So let's go ahead and maybe, okay, let's add a couple of line of code. Okay, we say if x is greater than y, then I just simply want to create another variable z, and I want to store x minus y. And once that is done, we'll go ahead and print the resulting value of z. But if x is not greater than y, in this case, I want to store in the z y minus x. And then we can simply go ahead and print the value of z. So now in this program, we are declaring two variables where we are saying, okay, hey, x is equals to 30, y is equals to 20, and we are checking if x is greater than y, then we need to execute these three line of code. If you recall in the previous example, we just had one single line of code under the if block of statement or if block of lines of code. And again, you can have one single line, you can have multiple lines. There is no such restriction with that. And same way under our else condition or the false condition block, we've entered around a few more lines. So if I go ahead and simply execute this program, it says, okay, hey, x is 30, y is 20, and we are checking if is 30. So x is 30, we are saying is 30 greater than 20. If that is the case, then you just simply say, okay, hey, x is greater than y. That's what we see, x is greater than y. Then we went ahead and declared a variable z, which says x minus y. So 30 minus 20 is 10, and then we're printing the value of 10. But if we go ahead and flip this value back again to something like 5, and if we test this whole expression again, are we saying is 5 greater than 20? No, 5 is not greater than 20. That means we came down immediately to the else block. We just went ahead and skipped all these lines, and we just came directly to the else. Inside the else, we say, okay, hey, print. That means y is greater than x. Y is 20 minus 5 is 15, and then we'll go ahead and print the value as z. So now let's go ahead and execute this line of code again, and we are printing 5. Again, if you want to simplify this program, a few further things, like in this case, we went ahead and declared this variable z, which is just storing a temporary value x minus y. So we could just simply go ahead and shorten this program. We don't need this print statement. We can get rid of the print statement, and we could just simply put a print around x minus y. And we can just repeat the same thing on this side, print y minus x. And now let's go ahead and simply execute this line of codes again, which is effective the same result, but we just went ahead and shortened our program. So that's the whole idea behind decision making, and that's how you make use of the if statement, else statement. And we will go ahead and explore in the next episode how do you really add multiple else statement or else if statement, and we'll go ahead and explore what are the nested if. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.